So we just finished watching the movie. So on behalf of the Long Island Ralph Kiner chapter of SABR, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. We had the opportunity to screen the movie for the first time, all of us here. Very interesting. Obviously, seeing you and just seeing you on the screen, we know how much this project meant to you. And as members of SABR, we're exploring this right now, what makes people the fans of the teams they are. And some of it is, inherited from parents. Some of it is a specific player. So this movie kind of hit on that note where I wouldn't say you're obsessed with Mark Fidrych, but he meant something to your life, obviously. You don't do a passion project like this unless he had something that really touched you. So why did you decide to do this movie, and how did it come about?
Yeah, great question. First of all, thank you guys for having me, and thanks for watching the movie. I, I've seen the movie a bunch of times, and I watched portions of it recently in anticipation of this, and I'm like, I don't. This movie is so personal to me that I don't know that anybody else is going to even like it. Uh, but with that said, I'll answer your question. You know, I was at that game on June 28th, 1976, when Mark beat the Yankees on Monday Night Baseball. And I was a 12-year-old at the time. And it was the most exciting sports event I had been to up to that time, but probably still is. And I've seen my alma mater, the University of Michigan, win a couple of NCAA basketball championships, and I've been in Wrigley Field when the Cubs clinched the pennant. Um, nothing nothing has compared to that night and the energy that the Bird brought to Detroit. Um, so yeah, I think that was part of it, and I think the other little thing is that I'm a lawyer by trade, and when I was a junior lawyer, uh, I don't know, sometime early 1990s, mid 1990s, I had written basically a speech for one of my bosses to give to a convention of vending machine industry people. And this guy walked in late to the meeting with frizzy blonde hair, and I'm like, why does this guy look familiar? And I was passing out the handouts that I had written for my boss. My boss is in front of the room giving a speech, and I walk up to this guy, and in his lapel obscured his name tag, but I could see RYCH, and I looked at his frizzy blonde hair and his eyes, and I went, "Oh my God, you're the Bird." And he said, "Yeah, man." And I'm like, "I grew up in Detroit. You're the fucking Bird." And he just got a big smile on his face and said, "Yeah, man." And I regretted that I didn't say, "Hey, let's go out for beers after this," because it was in Chicago. He probably knew nobody in Chicago, and we could have had the best night of both of our lives, and we didn't. So I somehow came up with this weird movie idea.
So, interestingly enough, there are guys that look somewhat familiar. And then when you do the IMBD, you go, oh, that's Ike Barinholtz's brother, and that's
Yeah.
Jim Belushi's son. How did those connections come about?
Oh, geez. I mean, Chicago. I live in Chicago. I grew up in Detroit, but I live in Chicago, and it's just rich with talent. And the Belushis and the Barinholtzes are from Chicago. Um, I, I- you know, I asked around and said, "Hey, I need two improvisers." And I used to do comedy in Chicago in the early '90s. Whole different story, with a lot of people who went on to direct really big movies like The Big Short and Iron Man and Elf. Um, but I never considered myself at their level. But I asked around, and I was like, "Hey, who?" I need two improvisers that work really well together. And they go, "Oh, you need Robbie Belushi and Johnny Barinholtz." And weirdly enough, I had a case against John's dad, who was a lawyer in Chicago at the time, and we're like, we got along great. And I was like, "Hey, I think I'm directing your son in a movie." So anyway, yeah, I just asked around, and they were game to do it. Uh, Rob Belushi's mom showed up at a screening of the movie at a film festival in Michigan and only wanted to see his parts. And I said, he's not on screen till probably an hour and a half into the movie. And she goes, "Oh, I guess I'll stay." And she came up afterwards and said how much she loved the movie and she'd never heard of Mark Fidrych. And she's like, "Wow, this is amazing that you did this. And thank you for putting my son in the movie." So anyway.
It's also interesting to me, being a Little League coach for years and then a travel team coach still to this day, the detail of the Little League season, the minors, how much of that was truly yours? Because, I mean, you take a look at dates and just being called up to the minors, and how much of that was really your life?
Yeah, I mean, it was semi-autobiographical, but also not what really happened. What is true is that I loved baseball and always wanted to pitch, but I was at best a mediocre baseball player. And my final year in Little League as a 12-year-old, I so wanted to get drafted to the majors. I didn't miss tryouts. They just don't draft 12-year-olds. So, I was the slugging first baseman. I was batting close to 500, but I wasn't allowed to pitch. And my pitching career was, one inning in relief when I was 11 years old. And, so that part of it was a fantasy of what should have happened when I was 12 years old. So,
There's also that deeper undercurrent of, things that I think in both respects, looking at from a purely film standpoint, I think the juxtaposition of your character in the movie not fulfilling what maybe he thought his career would have been, and then Mark Fidrych, not fulfilling his promise. How much of that was intentional?
um, I mean, I think a lot of it was intentional, but it was also kind of subconscious. The interesting thing, Mark, is that I, around 2005, 2006, when we ended up starting to shoot the movie, I started working in earnest on this screenplay probably in 2005. And I found some notes I had written 5 or 6 years earlier, and it was the same exact plot. And I think what resonated with me about Fidrych, even before I got to know him better in the course of the movie, was that he was a guy who had this mercurial rise that was this, the Cinderella story, right? 1974, he's 19 and pumping gas. 1975, he goes 3-8 in single A ball and gets called up to Triple A toward the end of the season. 1976, he starts the All-Star game for the American League and, comes in second to Jim Palmer in the Cy Young balloting. So it's like, wow, everybody likes a story like that. But it was also the exuberance that he brought to it, the fact that his career went like this and then like this, and yet he maintained that exuberance and that lust for life and that very genuine just friendliness and openness to other human beings. So I think it was subconscious, but it became intentional to make the movie be about second chances and opportunities taken advantage of and opportunities lost, and what are you going to do with them?
So the other interesting thing is you have all your children in this movie. Obviously your son is playing a 12-year-old. Marty is playing you as your little league self.
Yeah.
Your younger son is doing the road trip with you. Your daughter is in the movie as well. What was the experience like for them, like living your life as you?
It's interesting because they're now respectively. So Noah, who plays young Marty, is now 32 years old. Jack, who plays Jack, is 30, and Makara, who plays, Marty's little sister, is 29. And when they were in the movie as kids, I mean, the boys both did a ton of acting and also played sports and played music and other things. But I think when they were kids, they were just like, oh, this is another fun thing to do with dad. And sometimes it was fun and sometimes it was a pain in the ass, frankly, for them. like, hey, we're, because we could get the fields to shoot those little league scenes at like 8 o'clock in the morning until about 10 or 11 when the real games would start. And, getting your 12-year-old up at 7 o'clock on a Saturday morning to go shoot movie scenes, it's fun, but it's kind of a pain in the ass, right? As adults, when they've seen the movie again and they've seen other adults, and especially people from Detroit or people in our general age range, Mark, watch the movie, they have a totally different view of it. And they're like, wow, this actually really meant something. Not only to our dad who made us get up early in the morning and shoot movie scenes, but to all these other people. And I think that I think they really value it now. And it's been interesting to talk to them about their perspective, being in it when they were very young, seeing it when they're a little bit older, when it premiered in Detroit and played film festivals, and then seeing it as adults. I think their perspective has changed over those years.
I have a few more that I'm going to let the audience ask some questions. So, it's amazing how much technology has changed since when you shot this movie.
Yeah,
This movie probably now could be shot in high def on an iPhone. You could probably edit it all on your computer. When you look at it, do you regret that maybe the technology wasn't there to make it more higher production value, or does the fact that at some points intentionally it looks like home movies, a scene with you catching with your dad, in the fur hat,
yeah.
um, in the electric football scene, is that some of the charm, or do you think it might lose some of the charm if it was, high production value, bigger budget?
I mean, so like I'm not ashamed of the production values, but but it's spotty at best, right? There's even some scenes where the sound is not great, and I really regret that. Um, but we used a camera. It was a digital camera, um, and I consulted with a friend of mine who actually lives in Tribeca, but who grew up in Detroit with me. And she shot a documentary sometime before in the early 2000s called Mad Hot Ballroom. That's very good. You should see it. It's about kids dancing in the boroughs in New York. Um, and I said, what camera did you use? Because it looks like film, but I knew it was digital. And we got that camera. The reason the production values were spotty, there's a couple. One is that my cinematographer, James Gustin, is a guy who then and still owns a small production company. But if he got somebody to pay him to do a corporate video or a high-end wedding that paid him a lot of money, he would send one of his flunkies to shoot our scenes instead of doing it himself. And so there's unevenness in the way it's shot, and there's unevenness in the sound for the same reason. And then the scenes that we shot with Fidrych on his farm, we had 3 cameras rolling, and somehow my guys lost the A camera footage. So what you
Oh,
see here is all from the B and C
oh,
cameras. But thank
oh,
God we had 3 cameras rolling.
yeah.
So, you know, so that I edited, I pieced it together as best I could from the backup cameras that were getting weird
Wow.
angles. And so those are the reasons that the production values are not what you would hope. It, and the other thing I would add is I edited myself, and the movie's too long. I know it's too long, but to cut it from the rough cut of 2 hours and 17 minutes down to 2 hours flat was so painful for me, um, because there was so much stuff that I thought was great that, normal human beings are like, why is this even in here? So, yeah.
So for me, I think maybe second to last question. 30, I think the budget was what, 30,000 on it, somewhere around there.
Yeah. I mean, maybe even less, you
Right.
know.
But you have like, I mean, Freebird. It's like, I mean, I think the music rights had to eat up a big portion of the film. No?
Yeah, I mean, we paid to get the music rights and the rights to MLB's intellectual property just for film festivals. So I can't show it commercially unless I go back and renegotiate all that, but I can show it for charity events or small non-commercial screenings like this. So, um, so yeah, but that was fun. I mean, securing the music rights, like, I think 3 days before it was premiering in Detroit, I had to change one of the songs because the Eagles would not give us Take It Easy, but we got Bob Seger to give us Heavy Music. And we did that through connections I had in Detroit. A guy knew a guy who knew a guy who knew Bob Seger. And he was like, "Oh, it's a baseball movie about Mark Fidrych? Sure, do whatever the fuck they want." So it's like that. Yeah.
Lastly, from me, I think the charm of baseball are the what if stories. And, what if, and we were discussing this, what if Mark Fidrych, came along 10 years later, what his arc would
Yeah.
be. Was it, I think it's got to be so emotional for you, the fact that Mark never got to see the film, correct? He passed right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had talked on the phone a number of times after we shot his scenes, and I because I edited myself and I was learning on the job and working full time as a lawyer and was a dad. It took me a while to edit the thing, and there was a lot of footage. And I called Mark and said, "Hey, we have a rough cut. I'm going to send it to you." And back in those days, it was sent a DVD through the mail. And then let's talk about film festivals that we're going to enter. And he was like, "Yeah, Mike, the film festivals sound good, but summer, I'm driving my truck." And I was like, "Yeah, that's cool, but it's going to be a fun movie, and we're going to get in some festivals." And uh, about a week later, I remember I came back from court to my office, and my inbox for email and voicemails were overflowing with lots of friends who knew I'd been working on this labor of love, and they were like, "Yeah, did you hear about Mark?" And he died that day working on his truck on his farm. And I, you know, left. It was about 11 o'clock in the morning. I left the office, took the rest of the day off because I was devastated. So he never got to see it.
Imagine. All right, I'm gonna. Hopefully, this mic will work out there, so you'll be able to hear. Hopefully, we won't get feedback. So hold on. Wait, this is not on. No, no, but I have to go back there. Just talk loud.
Okay,
I'll relay it.
is this something you've gotten out of your system? Was this a one-off? You ever think about doing something else?
Did you hear that, or?
Yeah, I heard it. I heard it fine. Yeah, I did. I did a second movie that we shot in 2013, and you can watch it on your Amazon account tonight. It does not have anything to do with baseball. It's called Teenage Ghost Punk, and it's about a high school cheerleader from Michigan who moves to Chicago, and her house is haunted by the ghost of a 17-year-old punk rock guitar player. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Go ahead, Lon. They just walk up so you can hear. So.
Yeah, no, it's good. And
No, the camera's not on, Lon. There's no camera. No, yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. This is a follow-up to Mark's last question. Obviously, it was emotional for you in that the bird passed away right at the same time you were concluding your editing. But have you heard anything from his family, or did you hear anything at that time from them? And do you keep in touch with anybody?
Yeah, that's a great question. I last saw his widow, Anne, in Detroit. I can't remember what year this was, but it was a number of years ago when they had a premiere for the MLB Network's documentary about Mark. And we had a pleasant little conversation there. We're not in touch, but what did happen, we premiered the movie. So Mark died in April of 2009, and we premiered the movie at the Detroit Windsor International Film Festival in June of 2009. I can't remember the exact date. I don't think it was June 28th, which was the anniversary of him beating the Yankees on MLB, Monday Night Baseball. But we flew in his wife, Anne, and his daughter, Jessica. They were there. They were on the red carpet at the premiere. It was the Friday night headliner of this film festival. It won Best Director and Best of Fest awards at that festival. And the Detroit crowd, it was standing room only in there to see the movie. And it happened to be Jessica Fidrych's, his daughter's 21st birthday. And after the movie, I introduced them to the crowd. They stood up, and the Detroit crowd spontaneously sang happy birthday to Jessica Fidrych. And I get misty eyed thinking about it. There was not a dry eye in the theater. It was a bittersweet moment because it was so soon after Mark had died. And it was so meaningful to all those Detroiters there. And to have Ann and Jessica there was super special.
Nice, thank you.
Yeah, it's also interesting. I did a talk with Ken Davidoff, an author here, and we're talking about fandom and everything. And we were just spitballing, and we were saying, 9 months from now, how many kids born in New York are going to be named Jalen? So, given your love of the bird and being a 12-year-old at that time, what did he mean to Detroit at that point? I know the poem kind of spells it out, but
Yeah.
can you put into deeper words what he meant to your 12-year-old self?
Yeah, I mean, we just had the 50th anniversary of that game against the Yankees. And I just read yesterday a Detroit Free Press story on that. And it tracked a couple of teenagers who had driven 2 hours to Detroit without tickets. And they were, teenagers from a small town in rural Michigan. And they went to the will call box and said, did the Yankees return any tickets that they don't need? And they got free tickets behind the Yankees dugout in the fourth row for that game. And those kinds of stories crop up every time there's a major anniversary. Like the bird still lives really large with Detroit Tigers baseball fans and also the people from Western Massachusetts where he grew up. And as a 12-year-old, like it was, I mean, Mark, you asked the question earlier about, his rise and fall. Like that gave every 12-year-old that wished that they could pitch, but weren't very good. And I was one of those, like this hope that they could be something. And it was coming at a time when the auto industry was flailing. The city had a lot of crime problems. And he sold out Tiger Stadium, which was a great old, paint peeling, lovable, ugly place to watch a baseball game. He sold out every game after he, about 5 games in, and he sold out the games on the road too. And it was incredibly meaningful. Every time we showed the movie someplace, and we showed it a number of places in Michigan, but also in Massachusetts, and also someplace else. But people would come up to me afterwards and just want to share their own personal stories about Mark Fidrych, whether it was what he did for them when they were 12-year-olds in Detroit playing Little League ball, or what he did for them when, they were broken down on a highway and he randomly drove by in his truck and fixed their car and got them to their destination. Like everybody had a story about Mark Fidrych doing something good for their lives. And that was incredibly gratifying.
So it's also interesting if you look at that team, you have two different, story arcs. You have, we mentioned Fidrych rise from nowhere, and then you have another player, Ron LaFleur, rise from prison. That basically only because of I think it was Billy Martin hanging out at AC Lindell's, and the bartender telling him, "Oh, there's this guy at the penitentiary." An interesting story. I mean, how aware were you as a 12-year-old of Ron LaFleur's story on that same team?
Oh, super aware. Like, and I was a huge Ron LaFleur fan, and there was a made-for-TV movie where LeVar Burton played Ron LaFleur when LeVar Burton was coming off of his Roots fame. And I mean, he was a huge hero too, but I think he's faded more over the years than Fidrych has, with Detroit people anyway.
Yeah, I actually went to that bar, that AC Lindell, and the
I love
bartender
it.
there told us a story. I actually filmed the guy. I have to see if I can find that someplace. Anybody else have other questions? Oh, great.
You mentioned how you met him. How did you circle back to him? And was he interested in doing this, or did it take some doing to get him to do this?
Oh, that is a fat one down the middle of the plate for me. So even with my inability to hit a curveball by the time I was 13, 14 years old, I'm going to hit this one. So 2005, fairly early days of Google, I just Googled Mark Fidrych and I found his home address and phone number in about a minute. And so I wrote him a letter and I explained to him in the letter what the movie was about, but I did not hear back right away. So about 2, 3 weeks after I send the letter, I call his landline at his house, and woman picks up, turns out to be his lovely wife, Anne. And she says, no, and I'm no offense to anybody from Massachusetts or New England, but I'm going to try my, Fidrych accent here. She says, no, Mark's not here. I think he's out. Oh, wait. I think I hear his truck. She goes, yeah, that's Mark. Do you want to talk to him? And I said, yeah, I'd love to talk to him. So it was Mark. There's a guy on the phone from Chicago calling you. So he comes in, he goes, yeah. And I said, hey, Mark, my name's Mike Cramer. I'm calling from Chicago. Yeah. I wrote you a letter a couple of weeks ago about a movie idea I have. Yeah. So I didn't hear back from you. So I'm giving you a call to see if you got the letter. And he goes, yeah. Oh, you're the guy. He goes, you're the guy with the letter about the kid and the dad and the son and the baseball and me pitching and the kid and the dad and all that. You're the guy that wrote that letter. And I said, yeah, that's me. And he goes, yeah, I got it. He goes, it's on the dining room table. That's where the letter is. It's on the dining room table. And I said, okay, well, what'd you think about it? And he said, I saw the letter. I read it. I said to my wife, Ann, I said, Ann, did you see this letter? She said, yeah. Did you? I said, yeah, I did. I said, did you read it? She said, yeah, I did. What about you? I said, yeah, I read it too. I said, what'd you think? She said, I like it. What do you think? And I said, I like it too. So I said, so you'll do the movie? And he goes, yeah, I want to do the movie. I love it. But you're not going to believe this. I'm a member of the Screen Actors Guild. You're going to have to pay me scale. I said, no problem. So anyway.
So wait a minute. Let me over your, what is that? That would be your right. Is that your right shoulder or your left shoulder? What is that, the bird behind you?
Yeah, so this is a portrait that I painted of the bird. I did a series of portraits that I did based on old baseball cards 5 years before I made the movie. So
Wow.
there's that. And then a buddy of mine who's an illustrator who, if you're ever in Chicago and you get off the L,
I'm actually going to be in Chicago for the Jets-Bear game, October 10th.
there you go. Well, I doubt the Cubs will still be playing at that point, but if you get off the L at Wrigley Field, there's a bunch of murals of Cubs greats there, and my friend Steve Musgrave painted those, but he made this card just because he knew of my love for Fidrych, and so that sits up there. He made this as like a thank you card for us having him over to dinner or something. But anyway, yeah. So there's a whole,
The Fidrych Shrine. I get it.
yeah.
Any other questions before we go? Oh, yeah.
Is there any tie-in between Mark Fidrych and that imaginary character the Mets made up?
Sid Finch?
Sid Finch?
I don't believe so. That was George
There
Clinton.
absolutely is.
Oh, there is? Really?
And so Sid Finch does a cameo in Dear Mr. Fidrych. So the guy who played Sid Finch in that Sports Illustrated article was my kid's middle school shop teacher.
Oh.
I just saw him a couple weeks ago. His name is Joe Burton. He's a great guy. And he was friends with the photographer who did the shoot for that Sports Illustrated April Fool's issue, and he played Sid Finch. So he does a very brief cameo. He's sitting out in left field in a couple of folding chairs.
Oh, the two folding chairs?
Little League game. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That is bizarre. That is crazy.
Yeah.
That is great call. You have one more?
So did the movie break even? Did you make money on it or?
No, come on.
No. It's a good tax write-off, right?
Yeah, no, I mean the movie. I had a blast showing it in film festivals and meeting a lot of people from Michigan and Massachusetts who still carry great affection for this guy, who I think ESPN called the most celebrated career 29 game winner in the history of baseball. Um, and no, it didn't. I lost money. I invested in it. It was more than worth it. Like playing catch or watching your son play catch with Fidrych, and Fidrych is wearing your mitt from when you were a kid. Like that's priceless. It was more than worth it for that.
Yeah, it would have cost you more to go to Tiger Fantasy Camp, probably.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure.
All right. Thank you so much. We really enjoyed this evening. Great stuff.
I'm thrilled that you guys sat through the whole movie. I appreciate all the questions and the enthusiasm for the bird and what you guys are doing for baseball history. And I hope some of us can meet in person someday. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Good night.